She was collapsed on the front step, half on her side, one hand still pressed flat against the wood, as though she had been knocking even as she fell. The dress she was wearing had once been a wedding gown. Edmund could tell by the construction, the layers of ivory silk, the lace at the sleeves, the kind of careful, expensive ruin that only happens to things that were very beautiful before the night got hold of them. It was soaked through now, gray with rain and mud, and the hem had torn away on one side entirely. She had clearly been running in it for a long time. He knelt down. She was breathing, shallow, hitching breaths that caught every few seconds like something inside her hurt. Up close he could see the bruise along her left cheekbone, dark and spreading, and the dried cut at the corner of her mouth. He had seen enough of the world to know what those kinds of marks meant, and who usually put them there. "Can you hear me?" he said. Her eyes opened, brown and absolutely terrified, and then, as she looked at him, something shifted in them. Not relief, exactly. More like a person who has been running so long they've forgotten what it feels like to stop, and the stopping itself is almost frightening. "Please," she whispered, "he'll find me." "Who will?" But her eyes had already closed again. He carried her inside. Mrs. Hawthorne, his housekeeper, appeared at the top of the stairs in her nightcap with the expression of a woman who had long ago accepted that her employer attracted trouble the way open windows attract rain. She took one look at the collapsed woman in the wedding dress and came down the stairs without a word, already calculating. "Drawing room," Edmund said, "and send for Dr. Alderton." "Dr. Alderton won't come here, my lord." "Then tell him I'll make it worth his while." He paused. "Tell him whatever you need to tell him. Mrs." Hawthorne's gaze moved to the woman's face, to the bruise, the cut lip, the ivory dress that had started the night as someone's idea of a dream. Her jaw tightened in the particular way it did when she was feeling something strongly and had decided not to say it aloud. Then she turned and went to fetch her coat. In the lamplight of the drawing room, Edmund set her down on the settee and reached for the blanket folded over the armchair. As he spread it over her, something slipped from the folds of the ruined dress and fell to the floor with a small, bright sound. A letter, folded tight and sealed with no wax. Just folded, the way you fold something in a hurry. And underneath it, a locket on a broken chain, silver, small, warm from being pressed against her skin for hours. He set the letter on the side table without opening it. That was not his. But the locket fell open in his hand before he could think to stop it, and what he saw inside made him go very still. 2 miniature portraits. On the right, the woman now lying unconscious on his settee, younger in the painting, and smiling the kind of smile that comes from somewhere real. On the left, a man with pale eyes and a very pleasant expression that Edmund recognized immediately. Viscount James Deverell, son of the Duke of Ravenswood, younger brother to Lord Marcus Deverell, the man Edmund had shot and killed in Hyde Park 14 months ago, the act that had ended his life in polite society and begun the long, grinding campaign the Duke had been waging against him ever since. The woman on his settee was James Deverell's wife. She had run from her own wedding and come, of all the doors in London, to his. Edmund snapped the locket shut. He stood there for a long moment, the fire crackling behind him, the rain still loud against the windows. He thought about what the Duke would do when he found out. He thought about the 2 years he had already spent being slowly, methodically destroyed by that family. His reputation, his circle, his mother's last months of life. The doctor the Duke had bought and kept away from her bedside while she declined. He thought about all the sensible, self-preserving reasons to wake this woman up and sent her back out into the rain before dawn made the decision irreversible. He thought about the bruise on her cheekbone, the way her hand had still been pressed against his door even as she fell. He put the locket on the side table next to the letter and sat down in the chair across from her to wait for the doctor. She woke properly about an hour later, after Dr. Alderton had come and gone. 2 cracked ribs, a badly wrenched wrist, bruising that told a story the doctor had been careful not to say out loud. Edmund had paid him triple and walked him to the door, and they had not spoken about what they both understood. When he came back into the drawing room, she was sitting up, the blanket pulled around her shoulders, holding the locket in one hand and the letter in the other. She looked at him the way people look at someone they are trying to decide whether to trust, quickly, measuring, already expecting disappointment. "You opened it," she said, meaning the locket. "It fell open. I saw the portrait." He sat down across from her. "I know who your husband is." She absorbed that, nodded once, slowly, like a person confirming something they had already prepared themselves for. "Then you know whose house this is an enemy of." "I've been an enemy of that house for over a year," Edmund said. "I am still here." Something moved across her face. Not quite relief. Something more careful than that. "My name is Clara," she said. "Clara Deverell. Though I have been Clara Whitmore my entire life until yesterday. And I think I would very much like to be her again." Edmund said nothing, waiting. "I knew what James was before I married him," she continued, her voice steady in the way voices go steady when someone has rehearsed the telling of a thing and still finds it costs them something. "Everyone who was paying attention knew. But my father had debts and the Duke had patience, and by the time I understood what was being arranged, it had already been decided." She looked down at the letter in her hands. "Last night, at the reception, James's sister found me in the corridor. She gave me this. She said she had been building it for 4 years. Names, dates, what he had done. To servants. To her." Her jaw tightened. "She told me to run." "So you ran." "I walked out through the servants' entrance in my wedding dress, in the middle of my own reception," Clara said. "I had no money, no coat, and no plan beyond getting through the gate before anyone noticed. I walked for 3 hours in the rain." She paused. "My father mentioned you once, years ago. He called you reckless. But he said it in a way that meant something else. He said you were the only man he had seen refuse to give the Duke of Ravenswood what he wanted." Edmund looked at her for a long moment. "Your father wasn't wrong. It cost me everything." "I know," Clara said quietly. "I came anyway." The fire had burned low. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, and the first pale grey of real morning was beginning to show at the edges of the curtains. London was waking up. Somewhere across the city, James Deverell had noticed his bride was gone. Edmund stood and moved to the fireplace to add another log. He kept his back to her for a moment, thinking about what came next. Because something was coming next. That much was certain. The Duke did not misplace things. He retrieved them. And a missing daughter-in-law in a stolen wedding dress was very much the kind of thing the Duke of Ravenswood would want returned. "You can stay," Edmund said, without turning around. "Until you have somewhere better to go." A pause, then, "What if there isn't anywhere better?" He turned to look at her then. She was watching him steadily, this woman who had walked 3 hours through the rain to knock on the door of a stranger her father had described as reckless, clutching a letter full of evidence and a locket she couldn't take off her finger, and a plan that had ended at his doorstep. He thought she was one of the bravest people he had ever seen. He did not say that. It was too early for true things. "Then stay until we figure that out," he said instead. And Clara Whitmore, because that was who she was, regardless of what the register said, pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, looked at the fire, and for the first time in a very long time, did not think about what came next. She just sat still and let herself breathe. 10 days passed, and then everything got worse. Not dramatically, not all at once. It started with a letter slipped under the front door before dawn. No signature, no seal, just 4 words written in a hand Clara recognized immediately as her father's steward. "He knows you're here." She brought it to Edmund over breakfast and set it on the table between them without a word. He read it once, set it down, and poured her more tea. That was all. But that evening, Edmund dismissed the 2 younger footmen, paid them generously, gave them references, sent them somewhere the Duke's people couldn't use them, and hired 2 former soldiers Mrs. Hawthorne happened to know personally. He did not explain himself to Clara. He did not need to. She understood the language of quiet preparation. She'd grown up watching her father do the same thing whenever the Ravenswood family wanted something he could not afford to refuse. The difference was that her father had always given in. Edmund, it seemed, had never learned how. It was on the 11th day that James came. Not in person, not yet. He sent a man instead. Well-dressed, soft-spoken, carrying a letter stamped with the Ravenswood crest, and wearing the particular smile of someone who has been given instructions and enjoys them. Edmund received him in the entrance hall and did not invite him further inside. "Viscount Deverell wishes to communicate," the man said, "that he bears Lord Voss no ill will in this matter. He understands his wife may have been distressed on the evening in question. He asks only that she be returned quietly, and that the whole unfortunate business be forgotten by all parties." Edmund took the letter, looked at it, set it on the hall table without opening it. "Tell the Viscount," he said pleasantly, "that I have no wife here, only a guest, and my guests leave when they choose." The man's smile did not waver. "The Viscount also asked me to remind Lord Voss that his current situation, socially, financially, is somewhat precarious, and that the Duke is a man who values loyalty. There are arrangements that could be made, debts that could quietly disappear, a reputation that could be, let us say, reconsidered. A bribe, wrapped in silk, but a bribe." Edmund held the door open. "Good morning," he said. Clara had heard everything from the top of the stairs. She came down slowly after the door closed, and Edmund turned to find her standing in the hallway, with an expression he had come to recognize over the past 10 days. That particular look she got when she was holding herself very still, because the alternative was falling apart. "He offered you a way out," she said. "He offered me a cage with better furnishings." Edmund picked the unopened letter off the table and handed it to her. "He wanted you to read it, not me. That's why he sent it." She took it, broke the seal, read it in silence. Whatever was written there, it cost her something. Edmund watched it move across her face, the effort of keeping still. Then she folded it carefully, walked to the fireplace in the drawing room, and held it to the flame until there was nothing left. "He says my father is ill," she said to the fire. "He says if I come home, he will ensure my father receives the best care available. If I don't—" She stopped, steadied. "He says it would be a shame if my father's creditors grew impatient." Edmund said nothing. He understood now what kind of man James Deverell was. Not the kind who broke things in a rage, but the kind who found what you loved and pressed on it slowly, with a smile, until you made the choice he wanted. "I can help with your father's debts," Edmund said quietly. "Whatever he owes, it can be handled." Clara turned from the fireplace. Her eyes were dry, which somehow made it worse. "You have already lost so much because of my husband's family. I will not let them take what's left of your fortune too." "It's my fortune," Edmund said. "I'll decide what it's for." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had given up his sleep, his safety, and now apparently his money, for a woman he had known less than a fortnight. And something shifted in her chest that she did not have a name for yet, but recognized all the same. "Why?" she asked. Not accusatory, genuinely bewildered. "Why keep choosing this? You could be free of all of it." Edmund was quiet for a moment, then, "Because I spent a year doing nothing while people I should have protected paid the price for it. I'm done doing nothing." It was the most he had said about himself in 10 days. Clara understood it was not a small thing. She nodded once, slowly, carefully, the way you accept something you intend to keep. Outside, the Duke's man was climbing back into his carriage. He would report to James that the letter had been received. He would not report that it had been burned. James would find out anyway, eventually. He always did. But for now, the door was closed. The house was warm, and two people who had both been told in different ways that they were not worth protecting sat together in the quiet and let the fire burn. James would come himself next time. They both knew it. They just weren't afraid of it anymore. James Deverell arrived on a Tuesday, which somehow made it worse. Not a dramatic, storm-soaked night, not even early morning. Just an ordinary gray Tuesday at 2:30 in the afternoon. His carriage pulling up to Hartwell Manor like a social call, like he was expected, like he owned the street and everything on it. Clara saw him from the upstairs window. She recognized the set of his shoulders before she saw his face, that particular straightness that was not confidence, but control. The posture of a man who had never once walked into a room expecting to lose. She stood very still for a moment. Then she went downstairs. Edmund was already in the entrance hall when she reached it. He had not sent for her. He had not told her to stay upstairs. He simply looked at her when she appeared, read her face, and stepped slightly to the side, not in front of her, not behind, beside her. She noticed that. It was not a small thing. James came through the door the way he did everything, smoothly, pleasantly, as though the entire world had been arranged for his comfort, and he was gracious enough not to mention it. He was handsome in the way cold things are sometimes handsome. He looked at Edmund first, a brief flicker of something ancient and hateful, then at Clara, and his expression shifted into the one she knew best, warm, concerned. The face he wore in public, the one that had fooled her father and half of London, and almost fooled her. "Clara," his voice was soft. "My love, you look exhausted. This has all gone on far too long." She said nothing. "I understand you were frightened," James continued, moving a step closer. "The wedding, the pressure, it was a great deal. I should have been more attentive. I blame myself." He paused, tilting his head, performing regret for an audience of two. "Come home. We can forget this happened. All of it." "No," Clara said. The warmth in his face didn't disappear. It just stopped reaching his eyes. "Clara." "I have Harriet's letter," she said. "Every name in it, every date. I have Dr. Alderton's report documenting my injuries the morning after our wedding reception." She kept her voice level. She had rehearsed this, alone in her room at 3 in the morning, every version of this conversation. "If you take me from this house, every copy goes to every paper in London by nightfall. Not the ones your father owns, the others." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Clara had ever heard. James looked at her for a long moment. She watched him calculate. The exposure, the scandal, the Duke's reaction, the name. Always the name. That was the only thing that family had ever truly loved. Not each other. The name. "You would destroy yourself to destroy me," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I would free myself," Clara said. "Whatever it costs." Something moved through James's expression then. Not remorse. She didn't believe him capable of it. But recognition. The recognition of a man who has met the one wall he cannot walk through. He looked at Edmund, who had stood completely silent through all of it. And the hatred between them was old and layered, and far too large for this entrance hall. "You've made an enemy of my father," James said to him. "Again." "Your father made an enemy of me first," Edmund replied. "I've had time to get used to it." James left the way he came, smoothly, without slamming the door. That was almost the most frightening thing about him. He never lost composure in public. The damage he did was always quiet, always deniable, always somewhere no one else could see. But he left. Clara stood in the entrance hall and listened to the carriage pull away, and did not move until the sound was completely gone. Then she sat down on the bottom stair, not because her legs gave out, but because she simply needed to be lower to the ground for a moment, closer to something solid. Edmund sat down beside her, not across from her, not at a careful, respectable distance, beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, and he did not move away, and neither did she. They stayed like that for a while. The clock ticked. The house settled around them. "It's not over," Clara said finally. "The Duke won't let it be." "No," Edmund agreed. "But it's different now." "How?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Before, they were destroying me, and I was just trying to survive it. Now, I have something worth protecting." He paused. "That changes how you fight." Clara looked at him. This man who had lost almost everything and still opened his door at 5 in the morning to a stranger in a ruined dress. This man who fought not with noise, but with patience and quiet and an absolute refusal to be moved. She thought about the girl who had stood in a ballroom 8 months ago in a dress that cost a fortune, smiling a smile that cost more, counting the minutes until she could disappear. She was not that girl anymore. "Then we fight," she said. Edmund nodded once, and somewhere in that small, unheroic gesture, no grand speech, no dramatic declaration, just two people sitting on a staircase, deciding to face the same direction. Clara felt something settle in her chest that she recognized, slowly and with some surprise, as the particular quiet of a person who has finally, after a very long time, come home.